Good morning, y'all. We are live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and it's 9 o'clock a.m., just 9:05 a.m. for those of you counting at home, Eastern Time. We are live every Monday and Wednesday on these channels, youtube.com/Scott Kennedy, and Atlanta Falcons fans on All Falcons, and Scott Kennedy Sports on Facebook. So thank you for joining us here, and if you are listening afterwards, come see us. Come say hello, leave us a rating, all that kind of good stuff. My name is Scott Kennedy. I go by Scout Kennedy on the artist formerly known as Twitter. And on this side over here is Nick Kendall. Nick is in Seattle. I'm in Atlanta. So we got you covered coast to coast. Nick, how are you doing this morning, my friend?
I'm doing well. There's a little bit of a fall chill in the air. I'm underneath a blanket here in my basement. Haven't gotten the other just 2 weeks ago. It was 95 degrees in the house, but times are changing. So excited. That means football's right around the corner. I already have plans for tomorrow night to go and watch games with some buddies at a sports bar because you got real college football kicking off. Not Notre Dame versus Navy, but Minnesota, Nebraska, and Utah, Florida should be pretty fun. Good games there. So kicking off the year, and yeah, football is here.
All right. Well, that is very good. We've got Thursday at 6, my son's first actual football game.
It's
So
time.
they're short on players, so I know he's going to get to play.
Mm.
I would just worry about, he's a hell of an athlete. But, kids don't grow up playing football in the yard. I
Mm-mm.
didn't go out for football until ninth grade, and I didn't actually play for real until 12th grade, my senior year. But I knew what I was doing out there. I'm a little worried. Like, I just want him to have a good experience and not get hurt. Those are the two things I'm looking for right now. And if he can do that, his athleticism will take over. Get that kid in the open field, and he's going to run away from everybody. Want to say hello to some folks that are coming to see us this morning. Michael Ranquillo on YouTube says, "Good morning, Scott and Nick on the Falcons podcast. Appreciate your support, Michael, coming in. And let's go, Brandon, coming in. He says, good morning, gentlemen. I hope all is well. Berto over there on the 95 North Falcons talk show. We spent a little over an hour together last night and had a good time. He runs a good show, good host with a lot going on yesterday. He says, amazing show last night. Thank you for the opportunity, Scott. We definitely appreciate it. No, it was your show, man. Thank you. You can see it on my channel, though. I simulcast it to this, and you can find everybody. So it's good cross promotion for everybody. In fact, I'll put y'all's link into my description. I'll do that this morning. Make sure that everybody can find everybody because I appreciate y'all having me on. I had a good time last night. Jeremy Shaw, morning, guys. Not sure, but hopefully Hennessy made it just to confuse Nick. Matt Hennessy is he's IR'd, unfortunately, for the year. Matt Henningsen did make it on the Broncos 53. Matt Henningsen, different sides of the ball. If they ever have to face each other, look out. We're going to have like a wormhole open up or something because one's a defensive tackle. Matt Henningsen's a defensive tackle. Matt Hennessy is an offensive interior lineman. Good luck with that, Nick.
I'm never gonna get it right. Just appreciate it. I'll get maybe I'll just say the Wisconsin defensive tackle versus the Temple interior offensive lineman. We'll leave it at that. But yeah, he's on IR. Liked him coming out. Liked him more than Cushionberry. You guys stole him from the Broncos, in my opinion. But he's on IR, so I won't have to worry about that too much this year. And hoping speedy recovery because he was going to be a pretty good depth player for you guys this year. And depth on the interior offensive line is something that, looking at this unit, is like concerning.
Yeah, there is some news coming out about offensive tackle because I think that's where it's a little more concerning. There was some news this morning. As soon as we get done saying our hellos, we'll hit on that one just a little bit. Drake Wally coming in with a super chat. Look at you, Drake. He says, good morning from Indy. I'm a huge fan of what Atlanta has done with London and Pitts. Pitts had a rough year, but inconsistency in quarterback, I predict a bounce back. And Drake is from Indy, and Drake writes a bunch of Indianapolis Colts stuff and has been killing it on the Jonathan Taylor beat, along with all of this stuff going on at Horseshoe Huddle. You can find Drake, SI.com, because it's on Sports Illustrated /NFL/Colts. Nice and easy to find. I retweet a bunch of their stuff too. So appreciate everything that Drake is doing for us and doing for us today, directly coming with a super chat. And Drake, I wasn't the biggest fan of the Kyle Pitts pick coming out of the gate because of the lack of offensive line, really no defense at all. A 37-year-old quarterback that it was just in flux. But now that you've got it, I think you see what you've got now. If Ritter, it all comes down to the quarterback position still, and that was what my concern was. If you passed on a quarterback when you took Kyle Pitts, would you have one when you needed one? Well, they might. And Nick, you can tell us, because I used all kinds of descriptions on what it was like hitting on a third-round franchise quarterback. But why don't you tell us how valuable that could be if that happens?
Oh, man. I mean, some of the best things, it's been a cheat code for teams for a number of years coming through, specifically teams going far in the playoffs. I mean, typically winning the Super Bowl here recently, you've had to have a superstar quarterback, but it's been a lot of rookie quarterback contracts as well. I mean, we saw what it did for the Eagles last year. You can really build a super team around a rookie contract quarterback. So you got 2 years or 3 years, of cost control if Desmond Ridder can show to be an above average quarterback. He doesn't have to be Joe Burrow, doesn't have to be Patrick Mahomes. He just has to be, top 12, top 10 range. And that can mean if you build around him correctly and keep doing what the Falcons have been doing, you can have a very serious contender. And once you get in, anything can happen. So it really has been a cheat code,
especially with the type of offense that the Falcons want to run. It's slump proof. Someone may beat you, but you're not going to have, if your quarterback has an off day. I've likened it to watching the NCAA basketball tournament. Back in the day, if you didn't have a guy in the post, you weren't winning it. If you couldn't go down and get easy baskets, you weren't winning it because you'd have one off game shooting threes and you were out. That's a little bit how it's like, okay, I'm in the playoffs now and I go on the road and I get into some weather and now my passing game is taking a hit. Well, me being able to beat you in the trenches is as consistent gets. If I'm better than you in the trenches and that's my game plan, I got a pretty good chance. London, I think, he looks so good right now that he's up for a big year. And then Pitts will be back. Pitts was triple teamed, battling a little bit of an injury last year. Pitts is going to be just fine. But thank you, Drake, for coming in nice and early like that. Roderick Cook says, afternoon all, coming in from across the pond. Bubba Gump, good to see you again. Saw you last night coming in with the orange, the what is that? Red and black. I say red and black. All I think is Georgia, though. If I say the red and the black, I mean, that's the name of their student paper. Terry Ocean Boy says, what a do, Bird Gang. Good morning, Terry. Appreciate you being here. Big Ant coming in. Good morning, Scott and Nick, as well as everyone in the chat. That's all y'all. Kevin Fitzpatrick and Keith Robbins coming in on Facebook. Thank you. And then Robbie Red coming in with a super chat. Coming in blue. Appreciate you. He says, woo, love the morning stream. Appreciate you guys. We appreciate you. So thanks for coming in, my friend. And then 10 Cam 01 comes in. I thought we would have kept Whiteside. You did. The Falcons did keep Logan Whiteside, and we can get into that a little bit right now.
I think he meant JJ Arcega
instead of Logan.
Yes.
Okay. So that was okay. They did keep Logan Whiteside. They did cut JJ Arcega Whiteside.
I thought Woodside also.
Woodside. Okay. So now you threw me off a little bit.
Full circle.
Okay. Woodside. Now you're messing me up. I have Whiteside in my way. They did keep him, and we can talk about that. They're one of the, I think about a third of the teams, maybe a little bit more than a third of the teams kept 3 quarterbacks this year. How much is that different than usual? Several teams keep 3 quarterbacks before they change the rule. The rule means you still have to keep them on the 53, but now you can have a 49th player active on game days, but he has to be a quarterback.
Yeah, I don't think teams actually took that too much into account based on the numbers. They didn't look any different than historical for 2 quarterbacks versus 3 quarterbacks. We'll see if that changes. But as listening to covering the Broncos, listening to Sean Payton yesterday, he talked about what happened with the 49ers last year being a once in a decade event. So probably not enough that at this point in the season, you're going to worry about that. I mean, if you get down to your 3rd string Logan Woodside quarterback anyway, you're in trouble. So you have a better chance, obviously, going out there with him at quarterback than, let's say, Cordell Patterson or whoever the emergency quarterback would be for Atlanta. But they're not preparing for that scenario. I think it was, Tommy Moore. Tom Moore was the offensive coordinator for the Colts for a number of years. And it's like, why is Peyton Manning getting all the reps? It's like, because if he goes down, we're bleeped. We don't practice bleeped. And that's kind of where you're at with those level of quarterbacks at that point in the NFL.
I agree. I mean, how many times have you seen a quarterback go to the 3rd quarterback in a game? because of injuries. I honestly, I'm sure it's happened.
Yeah.
I don't remember it happening.
Not very often. Like you said, once in a decade kind of thing. It can happen. You're in trouble at that point anyway. The guy hasn't gotten the reps, the install. I mean, it's going to be hard to go from one quarterback hurt, two quarterback hurt, quarterback three.
I've seen it in college more often, but that's over the course of a season where they're starting their third string quarterback. That's because they're not allowed to sign guys during the middle of the year.
Mm-hmm.
That's different.
Yeah.
If I can bring in somebody off the street 3 days before the game and put them on the roster in the NFL and make a move. So, but yeah, I was a little surprised, honestly, to see Logan
Woodside.
JJ Arcega-Whiteside is Logan Woodside. Now you've got me all messed up. There we go. Yeah,
you got it.
JJ Arcega-Whiteside. So I had it wrong right out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
Only 5 wide receivers, I believe, were kept.
Yeah,
that was a little bit of a surprise for me too. Not a huge surprise, but JJ Arcega-Whiteside. Ali had done well. Zay Malone, I'm hoping, comes back as a practice squad guy today. And but yeah, you're cutting players that can play. That's a good sign for the Atlanta Falcons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is also not going to be the final roster. I know it's the final 53, but over the next 48 to 72 hours, waivers claims are going to go. Guys are going to be bouncing around the league. You're going to have your practice squad guys come in as well. So the roster that you see before you, well, in theory, is not exactly what you are going to have here, even by, Labor Day coming up here. So they're going to have a lot of rotation on that.
I think we'll see 3 to 4 changes, new faces based on maybe this guy goes short-term injured reserve, whatnot. But I expect to see 3 or 4 changes by Monday.
Yep.
Like you said, Albert Knopper says, good morning, everyone. Good morning to you, Albert. Appreciate you being here today. Anthony Evans says, good morning, guys. He's coming in on Facebook. So is Joe Cannon. Great morning, Scott and Nick. And Eric Tilley, good to see you in here. He says, good morning, fellas. It's been a while. It has been a while. Appreciate you guys keeping us staying until regular season. Trying to. It's it can drive you crazy if you pay too much attention to the mainstream media and just the avalanche of crap they keep just shoveling on the Falcons. I've kind of said that the stench of the last 5 or 6 years for the Falcons is just, it kind of permeates through the whole team, and it's not really fair.
Yeah.
I'm okay. It was like, well, the Falcons, they don't deserve any respect. They haven't gotten any. I'm like, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with saying, the Falcons aren't good. But when it starts going down to individual players, I start having a little bit of a problem with it. When you start seeing Bijan Robinson ranked 22nd, when you see Chris Lindstrom ranked as like the 7th or 8th best interior lineman guard in the NFL, when you start seeing that kind of stuff, I'm like, all right, y'all aren't even paying attention anymore. You're reverse ordering the draft and saying, okay, this is where we're going to do all of our rankings, no matter what position at all from now on.
And those are just puff pieces this time of year. Like you can't expect some singular writer to have watched every single guard. It's the same people doing the same list. So those guys will play well, and chips will fall where they may. At least you guys, I think I'd rather be where Atlanta is right now from the national media perspective is somewhat overthought right now. Not a lot of people are hyping up the Falcons other than Nate Tice over the Atlantic, who every chance he gets hypes up the Falcons offense and how they're going to be this year. But I digress. Probably better that position than, Kyle Brandt making fun of the Broncos every single morning, 10-minute segment about how Russell Wilson's corny or whatever. I'm exhausted from that. So Falcons are going to be fine. You guys are going to play good football. The schedule is as easy as I can think of a schedule in the last 5 years. So very little excuses for this team, and I think you guys will get some momentum.
Yeah, there is. The expectations have risen up, so to speak. They're on the rise. 7-10 is not going to cut it this year. 7-10 the last 2 years, I think, was overachieving. That's not going to cut it this year. There will be some pretty harsh criticism if this team is 7-10 again. And we'll be going back to, and you'll start hearing me say about, taking a quarterback at number 4 instead of a tight end if you don't have one. So a lot rides on Desmond Ritter's shoulders, but I think he's up for it. I think he's up for it. We'll see. We will see. Ryan Adonis comes in. He says, good morning. I watched the Titans 2020 offense game film last night, and what's missing on this team is a quarterback who will make the tough throws and has the guts to throw in the end zone. we'll see.
Yeah.
Can Ritter be that guy? Will he be allowed to be that guy? You get the feeling to a certain extent that Arthur Smith really, really hates turnovers more than most and would be a little bit more conservative with some of those shots. We'll see. I'm not
Mhm.
willing to have a blanket approach to what I've seen from Arthur Smith over these last 2 seasons based on the lack of personnel. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I thought he was a running coach. They can't run. I'm like, their offensive line was terrible in 2021, and you've got Matt Ryan. The
Yep.
next year, well, all he wants to do is run the ball. Your wide receivers weren't all that great, and your offensive line was gelling and coming together. And you had Marcus Mariota. Of course, you weren't throwing the ball around. Now we'll see. And again, a lot rides on Desmond Ritter because now you've got the offensive line, you've got some good weapons at wide receiver, and you got a hella acious offensive backfield. Some tight ends, you got some reserves too. You've got some depth on offense. So now it's time to see. Time to see what's what. Brandon Swank comes in. Nick, I'm sure you saw the news that the Falcons were bringing in Malcolm Butler for cornerback Malcolm Butler for a workout. And Brandon asks, and it's a good subject we want to get into, what do you think of Malcolm Butler coming out of retirement, visiting the Falcons today? Do you think he will make the roster, and if he would make an impact on the team? What are your thoughts on this?
He's been out of the game for a bit now. It doesn't hurt to bring him in to see if he has anything left for a reserve role. But this to me says that the Falcons are interested in potentially solidifying / adding competition to the cornerback room overall. But Butler he had that interception on the goal line where the Seahawks should have handed it to beast mode rather than thrown it. And he was good there for the Patriots for years. But cornerback is a position somewhat like running back where your peak is young and then you fall off and it's like you can't perform anymore. I mean, the margins are so small for good cornerback play in the NFL. So I mean, it doesn't hurt to bring him in, but my bigger takeaway here is, are the Falcons totally okay with where their cornerback position is right now? AJ Terrell obviously is great, but after that, you have names, but question marks. I mean, injuries have been
Some
there.
injuries. That's the big one right
yes.
there.
Yeah, so Jeff Okudah, D. Alford, Trey Flowers, Mike Hughes, and Clark Phillips have all made the team. That looks like an okay room on paper. Maybe you could do better with a cornerback 2 on there, but the injuries are concerning. I do wonder, because as we've said on here, and we're not the ones to coin this, but the NFL is a who-you-know league. It's a relationships league. And the Falcons brought over the Saints defensive line coach to be their defensive coordinator. And you have a pretty talented, years of good play cornerback that the Saints just released in Bradley Roby. I am curious if there would be any interest there from the Falcons. Now, that would be a big splash. He's going to get a solid contract. You probably could get away with a 1-year one, but Roby has inside-outside ability and opposite AJ Terrell and really solidifying that cornerback room with the connection that you have there with Nielsen. I haven't heard anything, but again, connection league,
it makes sense.
Those dots line up. Yeah.
It makes sense. And is it Bradley or Brady?
Bradley, Bardley Roby.
I want to see what his contract is if you were to pick it up.
He was outright released. So
yeah, but he is released. So because he is an older player, so you don't have to get him on waivers. He's a free agent now, which means he wouldn't have. But his contract isn't much. His base salary is now gone anyway.
Yep.
What was he? He was released. He was due. He was $7 million with the Texans, and he was in Texans and the Saints. He was 3.5, so he's not making a ton. He's not overly expensive. My thoughts on Butler is he's older and he's been out of the game. Those are 2 really bad things for a cornerback. If you want to bring him in, experience this, experience that, fine. We'll sign him as a coach. Let him come in and be in and do that or whatnot. Sign him as a veteran practice squad guy where he can come in and practice. I don't think I want this guy on the field. Frankly, I think unless there's injury concerns, I'd rather bring back Casey Hayward. Casey Hayward played pretty well when he was healthy for the Falcons last year. There's your veteran. He's not far removed. I'd rather bring him back. This begs the question, how healthy is Jeff Okudah? How healthy is Mike Hughes? And what moves might they make over the course of the next 48 hours? If they need to be short-term IR'd, then yeah, you're going to look at bringing someone else in. I just think you can do better than Malcolm Butler. And Roby might be a good shout, Nick. I think that's a very good idea. Want to hit the a nice reminder from Terry, says hit the thumbs up button, y'all. Bird Gang, that's the least we can do to help Scott get his content through YouTube, the universe. He says in his Smitty voice. Yes, thank you, Terry. Appreciate that. Bobby comes in. He says, good morning. Kevin Fitzpatrick. Let's hit on this now. Well, let's move over to the 53-man roster and talk about the offensive line. Kevin says the offensive line depth is scary. A little news here. Jermaine Afridi, who did play in 17 games for the Falcons last year, mostly on special teams, he's signed and will make the 53 of the Buffalo Bills today. So that was the news that came out today. So Atlanta Falcons swing tackle, who didn't have to start last year because Jake Matthews and Caleb McGarry stayed healthy, but we didn't get to find out, thankfully, what kind of value he could have had for the Falcons. And the Falcons didn't think enough to try and bring him back. However, he is going to the Bills. Well, the Bills are a pretty good team. This tells me a couple things. I don't know what it tells. Honestly, I don't know what it tells me. Does it tell me? I'm going to ask the question instead. It brings up a couple of questions. Do the Falcons feel good enough, or did they, about the guy they brought in who got hurt from the Saints, who's now IR'd for the season? Do they feel better about him than they did about Afridi? And if they didn't, they had a chance to sign Afridi if they wanted to and did not. What does that tell us about how they feel about their depth at offensive tackle?
I think that they're probably looking for somebody with a little bit more developmental potential and youth at the position than Jermaine Afridi, who was here for a year. He started for a number of years with the Seahawks. I believe that's where he was drafted from. Good athlete, but just the technique's always been kind of a little bit of a mess. So I think that they're looking elsewhere. Looking at the offensive tackle position now, would it be nice if you had somebody with the more of a known quantity than what the Falcons have right now at depth? Yeah. But I think probably contractually wise, didn't make as much sense for the direction they're going in. Somebody with a little bit more developmental upside at the position, especially now that you're paying McGarry and Matthews. You probably only had so much to put in that offensive tackle position when you are budgeting the roster.
Yeah, and I think this is where we start getting into practice squad guys. I think Tyler Vrabel comes back. I think Jonathan Harrison comes back. I think Justin Schaefer comes back. Will Jalen Mayfield come back? Maybe on there. You have 16 guys. He would not count as 1 year veterans. So you're allowed to bring in 16 players. You're allowed to bring in 6 guys that have 3 or more. No, he would count as 1 year because it's now 3. Your practice squad guys are 1 year or 2 years of experience, can take up one of the 16 spots. 3 or more, you only get 6 of those. So you'd have to decide on how you want to use him or Frank Darby if you were to try and bring him back. I think they'll be on the lookout for offensive tackles. I think that's the scary part. I think the interior line's okay. Hennessy would have been nice. But I was a big fan of what Kyle Hinton was doing in the preseason. Ryan Newsel looked good as well. So I like what you've got there. And maybe, and Nick, you've brought this up before, so I'm going to take this, but I'll credit you with it. Who might your swing tackle be in an emergency?
It could be, I don't remember who I said.
Could be Matthew Bergeron.
Yes, Bergeron. Yes.
It could be Matthew Bergeron, who you take him out from guard and move him at tackle, where he might eventually find a home through the course of his career anyway, and then you have a little bit more depth on the interior where you make that move. So that could be some of your depth pieces at tackle, is you're starting 3 tackles with Matthew Bergeron at guard right now. So that could be part of it right now, and I'm getting some well-deserved stick about Logan Whiteside, Arcega, Woodside. So thank you very much. Keith and Ellen Johnson says, good morning, guys. So there are any offensive linemen that were cut that the Falcons are checking out? I haven't had the time between doing all the work yesterday and potting and all that kind of stuff to really comb through the waiver wire. Nick, have you seen any interesting offensive line? And the problem is, Mr. and or Mrs. Johnson, everybody's looking for linemen. Everybody's looking for OL. It's tough. There aren't a whole lot of teams that go, oh yeah, our second team offensive line is really good, and it's hard. Everybody's looking for more depth on the OL, so they're not cutting too many good players, and everybody's looking for good players.
Yep,
Maybe you gotta pay those guys better.
Yeah, the market's after them. There's no doubt about that. Offensive line wise, I have gone through the list and I haven't seen anybody that really stood out to me. And without having actually go through the tape of all these guys, and don't have time to do that. I mean, the Broncos were at the facility last night until like 4 a.m. or something, going through trying to figure out who they could add. So, the only names that really stick out to me are the guys that have been available that are veterans, not the undrafted free agents who have shown well in camps and in preseason games. So, again, for depth, if on a really cheap contract, maybe somebody like Andrew Norwell, a bit more of a guard though. Dalton Reisner's still out there, but for a cheap contract, that's something that you could consider there. Tackle wise, though, I going through the list of the releases and the waves, nobody really stood out to me, and
Yeah.
that's offensive tackle every year forever.
Which is why you have to draft them. I
Yep.
mean, you've got to keep building that offensive line room. You got to, as you say, you got to keep stacking that wood. Rusty Moore says Mayfield cut, Darren Hall cut, Frank Darby cut. I know they were 3rd, 4th, and 6th round picks, but is it concerning that 3 draft picks have been released only 2 years later? I don't know. No, I don't think so. But you start wondering, it's like, okay, the jury's still out on that draft class because Kyle Pitts comes out looking like a future All-Pro, Pro Bowler for the next decade. Fell off a little bit. Richie Grant hasn't quite lived up to expectations. Avery Williams, I think, was a hit where he was drafted. Taquan Graham was a hit where he was drafted. Ade Ogundeji has put some time in, but God bless him, on a good team, he wasn't playing.
No.
So there's a lot of misses in there, which is fairly standard, especially when you're drafted. You're talking about 5th round picks, et cetera, in the lines. Taquan Graham is a big hit. You got to have Kyle Pitts become the guy for the highest drafted tight end in history, or it's going to that is going to rise this entire class. If you end up getting a future All-Pro, Hall of Fame type tight end, which is where you're expecting when you're drafting him this high and talking about the unicorn and all this stuff, that will rise up the entire class. It really will if you're able to get him out of there. But for me, I feel good about Kyle Pitts. The one that's really I've got my eye on, well, one, I've already canceled Mayfield. I think that was a bad pick, but is Richie Grant. If you're using a 2nd round pick on a safety, you need to have a plus starter back there in the backfield, Nick.
Yeah. Yep, I agree with you there. That's one that still have questions about, but he looked much better last year. Just going through answering some of your questions, just kind of going through some of the names here on offensive line. Chidoma Idogu, you guys recall him? He was for the Falcons 2 years ago, and he was released or waived by the Cowboys. If you're talking about 3rd or 4th,
I think he was here last year, and
he was there last year.
I thought he got some time. He went to McEachern, if I'm not mistaken.
I couldn't remember
is a
if
suburb of Powder Springs. As Metro Atlanta grows, it's a suburb of Metro Atlanta.
Mm-hmm. But he's one that, talking about depth at tackle, maybe could be somebody there for you. I also know Avante Collins, who was waived by the Bears. He has some starts in the league. He might be interesting out there. Those are the names that stood out looking through specifically offensive tackles. The waivers, of course, only list offensive linemen, not offensive tackle, but those are ones that stick out to me. Just looking through the list quickly here. So we'll see. But those are, I think, again, you already had Idoga there, and he's available again. You're looking for only a 3rd or 4th tackle kind of guy. Maybe that's somebody you can consider there.
Yeah, and you've got 9 right now, so I think there's going to be some changes. There was 9, or I think it was 9 that got kept on offensive line. There's 9, and guys like is Josh Miles, how safe is he? Jovan Gwynn, how safe is he? Kyle Hinton, how safe is he? Those guys could all be candidates to move here shortly. It's Organic comes in, says, "Good morning, people. Rise up, stay grounded." How do you do that? Yeah, no, rise up, keep your feet on the ground. Absolutely. It's a beautiful day to be a Falcons fan. We don't need Ritter to be Mahomes. He just needs not to be a loser. Yeah, game manager. I mean, it's a bad word when you're talking about quarterbacks unless you need one. And that's really what this Falcons team needs. Just don't lose it. Don't lose it. There will be times where he's got a chance where you're going to need Ritter to win a game for you. But over the course of a 17, you just need him not to lose them, and this team can win 10 games. Without a doubt in my mind. I think it's a great comment. It's Organic.
Yeah, that is a good comment. One last name for the offensive tackles, LaRaven Clark, former Texas Tech guy, I think went in the 3rd round of the Colts. he could be another one that I think he was in the same draft class as Jermaine Ifedi if you're looking for a third or fourth tackle. So there are some guys out there, at least that I recognize, that I from college and early in their career. So looking for offensive tackle depth. I think also the Falcons probably looking for wide receiver depth and I guess also cornerback depth with the injuries there.
I think we've gotten a pretty good statement of intent that they're looking for corners early in the season if you're bringing in Malcolm Butler.
Yeah.
Unless it's just doing somebody a favor. You never know. Atlanta's a good place. There's a lot of people around here. I mean, for all I know, he lives around here. A lot of athletes do. Albert Knopper says, I know you don't like this question, Scott. Was there a player you thought for sure would be on the roster but got waived on any team you cover? Same for you, Nick. No, this is different. This is a great question, Albert. This is, were you surprised by anything you saw? That's a great question. The ones that I have trouble with are that, can you predict the surprise? Well, if I could predict it, it wouldn't be a surprise. Those are the ones like, do you expect any surprises? Those are counterintuitive. What's the word when you have opposite meanings, like military intelligence or something like that?
Counterintuitive. I mean,
there's a phrase for that, and I forgot.
Oxymoron.
Oxymoron. Yeah, that's what it is. Expected surprises are an oxymoron. I have trouble with that. I'm a math guy, super logical. Being surprised, absolutely. I was surprised that defensive tackle Timmy Horn did not make the 53. Now, he is a guy that could be back to the practice squad, and they could have a handshake deal, say, listen, we got to make a couple moves, come on back. But defensive tackle Timmy Horn not making this team for the Atlanta Falcons surprised me. It surprised me. Looking at your orange and blue Denver Broncos, we tried to talk about the negative of Albert Okwuegbunam. The negative has been, dude, where has this been for 4 years now? Where has this been? It makes you question the effort and attitude he's put in at Dove Valley over there over the last 3 years. And if he'd already, sorry for the expression, but dug his grave. And no matter how great he was going to look, which looked like an all-pro in his final preseason game, was going to be enough for him to make that team. I think that's what happened, but it still surprised me a little bit because we don't know that going in, Nick.
Yeah, for sure. For the Broncos, two that surprised me were Quinn Bailey in his versatility. I thought he looked pretty good in preseason too. So he was released. He was one of the last ones announced. I think there's a good chance that he's back on the roster. One of those guys that they have a deal worked out with. Maybe that's one of the reasons it took so long too. It's like, hey, if we do this, we want you back. It's just procedural because once we put this guy on the short-term IR, we want you back. So that's one. And same thing with Mike Purcell, especially after they renegotiated his contract and then only to release him. I'm not sure what that means for him long-term. There are some nose tackles available now that also maybe the Broncos would look at. You mentioned Timothy Horn. He's out there. Rashard Lawrence, who Vance Joseph had as a nose tackle there in Arizona when he was the DC. So, yeah, it's those are the ones that surprised me. For the Falcons, and I see a comment here from Lance Render as well. He mentioned it, but Jasmine says, morning, guys. Good to see you, Jasmine. I really appreciate you. I was a little bit surprised by Parker Hesse being released, considering what a do-it-all football player he has been for Arthur Smith. I mean, press conferences I've seen, they've mentioned him and spoke highly about him. I'd be surprised if he's not back, or maybe he's one of the guys that comes back after the short-term IR move. But Parker Hesse was one, along with Timothy Horn, that were a little bit, I guess that makes sense, but he's been a good player for you.
Yeah, and it begs a question. Good morning, Leon Mapstone coming in. And Jasmine, I hope you're enjoying a nice cooler. It's been wet. The storms have come in. I hope everybody's staying safe that's a little south of us in Atlanta. I know there's some trouble down there in Florida. Hope everybody's staying safe. Mm-hmm. Leon says, good morning to you both. And Jasmine, good morning to you as well. Yeah, you start looking at those, and that's one of the questions you have. Do you need Logan Woodside as that, or would you rather have had one of these other players that we're talking about? Now, for me, I probably would have rather had an extra defensive tackle, but maybe you can bring him back. Those are the things we'll have to wait and see. Before we're going to rush to judgment and all those type of things. I know. Let's wait and see what we have. And as Berto says, he says the Falcons are 8th on the priority waiver wire, which is where they drafted that. As long as they didn't change or move around, that makes sense. Let me see here. I wanted to hit some other questions. Some folks coming in. Y'all are chatting amongst yourselves for sure. Smitty's in here. Antoine Smith, appreciate you being here. He says, morning, fellas. Good morning to you, Smitty. Hope things are going well for you this morning. Robbie Red, double dipping with the super chat. Thank you, sir. He says, which rookie wide receiver will have the best season. Thanks. He's looking for his fantasy football fix already. So who, if any, I don't feel like I'm coming in, Nick, this year with huge expectations for wide receivers this year. Who's the guy? Last year, there were a ton of them, with Drake London was the first, and then they came off about 5-6 in a row, in the first round. And then there were some second-round guys that we loved last year. George Pickens, Alec Pierce, Christian Watson. The receivers in the top 40 went about 12 deep. This year, I don't feel like I've got the buzz for any of the wide receivers this year. Where am I wrong?
Jordan Addison. He's getting a lot of hype out of Vikings camp, and outside of Justin Jefferson, they don't have wide receivers who are really moving the needle. He's apparently been super, just easily getting open out there, good body control, and showing why he was the, what's the name for the wide receiver award? Won it 2 years ago with Pitt. So he's one that I think should deserve a little bit of hype and getting some hype there. Also, I think Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee, now with the Giants, has also been creating a little bit of buzz out there in New York. He had a pretty good camp against Sauce Gardner. There's a few plays where we had the classic Sauce Gardner highlight. We're like, oh, look, Sauce with a good pass breakup. And he's like,
he's got a hold of his jersey at his midsection.
Horse collaring him. Yeah, just like what the every time. Can we have a Sauce Gardner highlight that is not him doing egregious holding or pass interference? I digress.
Flowers, I think, has also gotten some good looks.
Yep.
In Baltimore. I haven't heard much from Quentin Johnson. Jackson Smith and Jigba up at Seattle. It was the other first rounder. I think he was the first guy taken, and he broke his wrist, if I'm not mistaken. So he's battling a little bit of an injury. Who's gonna your sleeper on this, Nick? And how do we not say this? And he's worked his way into first team reps with a rookie quarterback is Jonathan Mingo over in Carolina. Jonathan Mingo can do a bunch of things after the catch. So keeping up with him. Y'all mentioned Dalton Reisner, and Kevin says, don't get Scott started on Dalton Reisner. No, I'm okay with Dalton Reisner if he were to be a backup coming in to add depth. I don't think here I go. You're right, Kevin. I don't think his ego will handle that. That's why he hasn't signed. I'd rather have Colby Gossett back. When I wrote it up in March, I said I wouldn't take Dalton Reisner for anything more than Colby Gossett money. That's exactly what I wrote. Colby was on just under $1 million a year to be a backup. Colby's available, and he played well when he got his chances. So there are options out there, and I think Nick hit it on the head a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about offensive tackle depth. Your backup offensive tackle, your swing tackle, is Matthew Bergeron, because that's his long-term projection. I don't know how easy that would be to do in the middle of a season, Nick, but we've seen guys that are backups be thrown in at different positions from guard to tackle and expected to perform. So why would it be different for your prize second-round pick?
It just depends on what's the best five out there. Does moving Bergeron from left guard to tackle create a lot of issues for the rest of the unit, the chemistry there? You're having to switch up the communication for multiple guys versus just a new right tackle coming in. So there's a lot of moving parts there. But Bergeron, he came in, I think started immediately at right tackle and then played left tackle. So he's got some experience there. Smitty's Sports Machine comes in and says, I look at Ronald Darby at cornerback if Malcolm Butler is not signed. If Darby's healthy, he's had a lot of injuries.
Darby just signed.
Ronald Darby just signed too?
Ronald Darby signed with somebody this week.
Okay, I missed that.
East Coast team like Commanders or Ravens or something like that. Next time I go on one of my 3-minute monologues, Nick, you can look it up. But Ronald Darby signed, unless he was cut, and he may have been. But I thought he signed with somebody last week before the 53s.
I have not seen anything about that. But, it looks like the Ravens signed him.
Ravens, okay. Yeah. How do the Ravens end up with these? Awesome, because they get guys like this on a discount. Ronald Darby, I would absolutely have brought in Ronald Darby, Smitty. Abso-freaking-lutely. For a cornerback 2, cornerback 3 in this room. At the price they got him was probably in the 3 or 4 range. I would think that would be his market value. Abso-freaking-lutely, I would have brought him in. I think that's a good shout, but going to the Ravens. So now we can shout Bradley Roby instead. Yeah, I think that's solid too. We talked about breaking down the 53. going through it, I'll just hit some of the names real quick. We won't have to go through everything. Hit all Falcons if you want to see the names. I'll drop let me know what you think in the comments of this. Do me a favor, and if you follow this link, leave a comment on the link itself. That really, really helps the site when I've got the engagement on this. But what I did was, as I was going through it, I used strike throughs so you could see who made it and who didn't. And some of the cuts there, the running back Godwin Igwebuike, we were not surprised that he was cut. I will be very surprised if he's out of work for longer than 24 hours.
Yeah. Now he'll be ending up on our practice squad somewhere. I mean, he's a young running back and showed promising there in Atlanta. So somebody will pick him up looking for depth. The question is he going to be signed outright by somebody or claimed by somebody or end up on a practice squad somewhere? So that's remains to be seen, but he'll be one that at some point this year, there will be injuries to running back positions and he will get called up and have a chance to carry some snaps.
Yes, and that was my point on that was, he'll have a job. He can play in this league. Rich says, "Hello, Scott and Nick. I'm looking forward to the playoffs this season. Maybe a top 10 offense, top 15 defense." I think that's fair. I think that would get you in the playoffs, assuming that you're not minus 40 in turnovers. But this was the number 15 scoring offense last year, and they were a field goal away from top 10. They can move up to top 10.
Mm-hmm.
They can absolutely do that. They can move up to top 10 with a field goal. I think they can do that. Top 15 is going to take a little more work, but they've invested heavily, and you are waiving guys. There's guys that are not making the 53 that started a lot of games last year. Timmy Horn played a lot of football last year, didn't make the 53. Darren Hall played a lot of football last year, didn't make the 53. Casey Hayward was cut way early in the process. Obviously, he's not on the team anymore. And there's players that you didn't bring back. There has been a complete overhaul on defense. There's so much more talent there that your expectations going in should be a lot higher. You really can't look at this team last year, Nick, and draw any conclusions based on what you see out there this year for the defensive side of the ball.
Massive overhaul. I think the biggest one that you can probably draw any sort of conclusion on is that you have a lot of complementary solid players at edge rusher. I don't think you have a line them up and cause a problem every single game, every single snap kind of edge rusher out there. So I think that's one that we can probably take that away from last year. Now, granted, maybe Ebiketie takes a big step, although I think at this point, year 2, you would know if he was going to be that level of a problem, a capital P problem. Typically, those guys you see pretty darn early if they're going to be like that. So I think probably and not every team's looking for, their own Nick Bosa or Micah Parsons or Myles Garrett. That's the reason a lot of those guys go, number 1 overall, even over quarterbacks a lot of times. So the great ones, at least. So great prospects, that is.
Yeah.
So
looking at wide receivers, Chris Walker asked, "Do you think Penny Hart makes the practice squad?" Maybe. I think the guy you really want to bring back is Zay Malone. I would love to have JJ Arcega-Whiteside in there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm indifferent on Matt Sexton and Slade Bolden. I would like to see Zay Malone, Penny Hart, and JJ Arcega-Whiteside. Those guys, they made some tough calls. We talked a little bit about offensive line already. The changes. We've talked some tight end.
Mm-hmm.
The decision between Parker Hesse and John Fitzpatrick. We'll see what happens with Parker. He can play in this league somewhere. He can do a job. The defensive line. I mentioned guys that probably would have started on this team 2 years ago that didn't make the 53. How about Justin Ellis? This guy has been a pro in the league for a long time. He was cut early in the process of 90. It says a lot about what you're looking to do there. Edge, Delonte Scott, and Kameko Ture were cut. No surprises there. You kept Bud Dupree, Lorenzo Carter, Arnold Ebiketie, and D'Angelo Malone. And Nick, edge, I think, is still your number 1 priority for this team moving forward. Assuming you get good quarterback play, your number 1 priority for this team is edge moving forward 2024 and beyond.
As far as a difference maker, searching for that kind of guy, then looking at the roster, that one makes sense. I guess you could maybe argue if you're talking like 2024 draft, given the age of Calais Campbell and Grady Jarrett, maybe you want to keep that position strong, and maybe it's an interior defensive line as well, because they're good in the short term, but long term, that's you have some guys that are a little long in the tooth there. But edge is the one that if you can get a true difference maker there, that will completely change the entire dynamic of the defense, going from probably a solid unit this season to potentially pushing up, top 10, top 5.
Eric asks, I heard we had some injuries, some inquiries. I'm sorry, because I read that as injuries because there are some injury concerns with Cordero Patterson. Have you guys heard anything worth mentioning about? Not for me. They would have to totally overpay if Cordero Patterson is healthy, and all Arthur Smith will say about it is we feel confident. It's all in the plan, so we'll see week 1 if he's blowing smoke or not. But Patterson's got 2 years left on his 3-year deal that he signed at a discount because F the money, this is where I want to be. And by God, he's been the best player the Falcons have had the last 2 years. And Falcons fans love him for it. He comes out there. It's not easy. Look at the difference between Cordero Patterson and Mike Davis. When they joined the team, Mike Davis comes in with a big grin on his face, and he leaves looking like a beaten puppy. Cordero goes out there and plays his ass off and does it with a megawatt smile that lights up the dome. He means more to this team than a 4th-round pick that you might be able to get for him for a 32-year-old X-Factor type of player. Now, if the season goes in the tank and it's Halloween trade deadline, maybe. But CP means more to this team than what anybody would be willing to give for him, is my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, wants to be here, too. I think that matters a lot. So I can't imagine any sort of trade offer for Cordero Patterson. I mean, he's a leader on that team, and it seems like the coaching staff love him. It seems like the teammates love him. So he's one that you're happy to have on here, and he can take over a game, honestly, when you need to create some dynamic plays. And there's probably very few coaches in the league, if any, that can maximize and scheme specific touches for a guy like Cordero Patterson. So I think he's probably happy to be here, and I can't imagine them moving him unless somebody came and offered something stupid. I mean, everybody's for sale for the right price.
Yeah.
But what are you even getting for him right now? A 5th-rounder? Maybe, considering he's also dealing with an injury, it's not worth the return that he'd be
take
offered.
a 2nd-rounder for me to pick up the phone, and nobody's offering a 2nd-rounder.
Yeah.
For me to even pick up the phone, we want to offer you a 2nd-round pick. I'm like, okay, I'm listening. But after that, he means more to this team. You have to deal with the people and the personalities. There are human beings involved, including y'all as fans. I mean, how would you feel if you found out that Cordero Patterson, there would be some people that are out there that just don't give a flying fool about these players at all. No. They'll be like, well, he's old, he's gone, he's what? No, he's not. He was extremely productive last year, and using him more efficiently this year could be a lot of fun. I want to see him 10 to 12 touches a game, not as a primary running back ever, because the man does not know how to protect himself, and that's one of the reasons why we love watching him play, because he takes every time he touches the ball, he plays like his hair's on fire and he's trying to run it out. Moving down just a little bit, and I see some questions coming in as we're getting to these. Inside linebacker, no surprises here. Caden Ellis, Tay Davis, Troy Anderson, Nate Landeman. Tay played his way onto this team. I thought Mike Jones Jr. and Deion Jones's 45 looked pretty good. Hopefully he comes back to the practice squad. But this says to me, Nick, a little bit like we've talked about Desmond Ridder, is there's little experience there. The Falcons have backed Desmond Ridder as their quarterback. I feel that way about it. Doesn't get talked about as much because it's middle linebackers. Who cares compared to the quarterback? I feel like they've done the same thing at inside linebacker with Caden Ellis and Troy Anderson. Y'all are young, y'all are raw, you're athletic. We love the potential. We're gonna feed you and fan you. Let it go. This is backing these young players for me instead of bringing in or bringing back a Rashaan Evans type veteran.
And you know what? There are a bleep ton of Rashaan Evans type veterans out there right now. There are every single year. So let's say you go through 2 weeks and you can't get the checks right, the run fits are poor, the process isn't as bad. You're going to be able to find somebody out there to bring in, help support the group and potentially supplant one of them as well. So letting the young guys ride, your veterans are sandwiched around them on the defensive line and with Jesse Bates behind them as well. So I think it's a fun group. There might be a few plays here and there where it's like, they really bit way too hard on that misdirection or play action, or the run fits are having some issues from time to time. But I think it's one that you're going to ride with for a bit, and you're going to trust the linebacker coach and the defensive coordinator, get them right and see what it's like. And if they're struggling, you're going to have a chance to bring in some veteran help.
Yeah, it won't be hard to get a guy that come in and to do a job at that position for cheap. Jeremiah Kinlaw, good morning, my friend. He says, good morning, guys. I hope they bring Igwebuike back to the practice squad. Me too. For the Falcons' sake, for his sake, I'd love to see him on a 53 because he makes about 6 or 7 times the money. But yeah, he can play in this league. I'm convinced. A guy like, a couple of the guys that were cut, Timmy Horn, I swear the last couple of years, you're just looking for guys, and we've said it, especially that 2021 season. I'm like, how many legit NFL players are even on the field in the 22? And there was like 5, 5 or 6 maybe. They've cut that many in this going down from 90 this summer, 90 to 53. They've cut that many. Timmy Horn can play in this league. Igwebuike can play in this league. Those are guys that we'll see there. Hopefully, for the Falcons' sake, you're hoping they can get back. Keith has a good question over on Facebook, and Nick, I'm going to throw this one to you. Would you be surprised if Kyle Pitts isn't a top 10 tight end statistically this year? And if so, what would be the consequences?
I would be very surprised, given the lack of pass catchers that are demanding of multiple targets. I mean, Mac Hollins could be fine getting very little because he maximizes those ones, and that's just he's not a volume player. Drake London and Bijan, are probably, you could argue, more volume demanding players, as they should be. But yeah, he should have a top 10 statistical season for tight end. If it's not, it is due to the lower denominator of attempts that the Falcons are out there because they're running the ball so effectively, or injury, which in itself
let's throw health out the window because that's always a given. That's like a constant in any equation. That yes, before we give any take about predicting the future, he has to stay healthy. That's a given. That's like the fine print.
Yeah, so I think the only way that it could not happen is if the offense itself is not really passing the ball enough to warrant that type of production. But other than that, I mean, the tight ends, you're not against a lot of competition. Or Desmond Ritter's just really emphatically not the guy, and it's the same as the Mariota thing last year, where like he's open, he's being schemed open, they're just outright missing him.
Mm-hmm. I would be very surprised, Keith, if Pitts isn't a top 10 tight end statistically. That's 500 or 600 yards. It doesn't take much to get into the top 10 at tight end, especially when you're playing wide receiver the whole time, which he is. He lines up outside and inside at XYZ a lot. If so, what would be the consequences? There's so many. What are the factors that lead into it? Again, injury is 1. 2, what's your quarterback play? Are you looking for a quarterback now? 3, how bad is your season? Why? There's so many factors that could cause him not to be there. I would need to know what are they, because you figure if he's not in the top 10, he's gotten hurt. Literally, that's about the only way I can think that he's battling injury. And again, we have to write that one off because then it's not surprising if he's not in the top 10 because he's not playing. But what are the consequences if he's out there and not producing? You're probably struggling on offense. And if you're struggling on offense and not winning games, the seat starts getting really hot this year. I think unless it's an outright disaster, Arthur Smith gets a 4th year. Someone in the chat, Keith, it may have been you, asked about Arthur Smith's hot seat. I don't think his seat's any hotter than anybody else's out there. Those takes like, his seat's hot because if he goes down in flames, he's going to be fired. That's true for everybody, man. That's for pretty much just every non-first year coach usually gets a 2nd year, unless you're Nathaniel Hackett, then you don't even make it that far. But the implications of him not having a top 10 statistical year are all negative. They're all negative for the Atlanta Falcons, considering that resources and how much you're counting on him to be a big part of your offense. Michael Lewitzki, good to see you. He says, morning, guys. Appreciate you being here. 95 North Falcons says he's agreed. Scott, would you expect the Falcons to address this position as we get closer to opening day? This happened a while ago, and I'm not sure which position we're speaking of. So let me say I think the positions that you're most looking at to try and upgrade through the course of the season. I think wide receiver could be one of them, though I like the depth that the Falcons have at wide receiver. If a big-name guy becomes available for the right price, you're absolutely thinking about bringing him in. offensive tackle, I think, is one of those. And then as far as, I don't think you will see an edge available that would be worth trying to give up resources to. That's the big position for me. And right now, cornerback. I think they're a little worried about the health of some of these guys, and they've got their eye out on some corners. Those are the three for me that I think that they will be really, really scouring the waiver wire and other teams for.
Yeah, wide receiver makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think they'll probably still bring on somebody before the season starts there. Could be Arcega-Whiteside, not Woodside. Maybe he's the guy, but we'll see there. Offensive line depth in general, that's one that the whole league is competing for, but you are 8th, 7th, 8th on the waiver wire, so maybe you can bring in somebody there. And cornerback depth is a big one. And we talked about it already a little bit too, but if the linebackers are struggling, you can find a veteran in there that can come in and do a job. So that's one that I think that is, if injuries occur or there are struggles, then you can make a move. I think you're going to be pretty confident with the guys you have, Ellison, Anderson. But talking about Anderson, Troy Green comes in and says, when it clicks for Troy Anderson, oh my God, could you imagine if he had Paul Warlow instincts? That would be great. But the processing is one thing that linebacker is a head up position. You got to be big enough, fast enough, strong enough, but the instincts and being in the right place and reading everything is super important for that spot. Anderson's still pretty raw to the linebacker spot, given how much he was, quarterback, running back, pass rusher, linebacker, all these things for Montana State. So we'll see what it looks like year 2 for him. I still expect a little bit of erratic play, but trending in the right direction for sure.
Yeah, and again, just get the reps and have the I think he's got the football IQ. Now he just needs the experience. I mean, he was conference player of the year in college. I don't care what level, at 2 different sides of the ball. Man, when has that ever happened? Do we have to go back to like Jim Brown or something? I mean, that can't have been very common. It certainly hasn't been in D1, but in years, I can't think of that happening, where a player won conference player of the year on 2 different sides of the ball. That's incredible. So I know the guy's got football IQ. Now it's just a matter of getting experience. And he's an uber athlete at the position. It'll be fun to watch. Maybe the best inside guy since Keith Brooking. I think what might be fair to say, and that's been a while already. I think Brooking was probably 98, drafted in 98. So what are we talking about? How's that, 25 years now?
Yeah, it's been a bit.
25 years. He played a long time, but he was drafted 25 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a bit.
I'm getting old enough that when I think 80s, I'm like, oh, that was like 20 years ago. No, carry the one, Scott. The 90s was 25 years ago.
Yeah. No,
so on that note, I think we're going to get out of here. We're getting really close to 1 hour. It's been a great conversation. Appreciate everybody for coming in. Make sure you're following us on the Twitter X. I think one of the boys last night said Twix. I like that. And I always like the past tense of tweeting is twatting. So this is now the Twox, I guess is what we call it. Make sure you're following us so you can keep up with everything we're doing. I'm at Scout Kennedy, a little play on words from my past. And this is Nick Kendall at MHH. We will be back Friday to talk NFL football. So I know we've got some fans of different teams in here. Come on back. We'll be back Friday at 9 a.m. to talk the biggest stories. Jonathan Taylor, what else is going on? The biggest cuts, waves, all of that, and team building as we get into the final week before the regular season, Nick.
Yep. Football is here. I'm excited for college football this week. Heck, got a lot of fun games coming on, and it's all happening right away here. So excited for that to really kick off starting tomorrow. I don't think we have any Maction tonight. We could, though. There's some fun small school quarterbacks as well, but yeah, going to be a good week, and excited for football to finally be here. Cooler weather's in the air, and it really is time for football.
I just dropped in the chat the link to our Apple Podcast. So if you're watching this live and you want to help us out, give us a review and a rating over there on the Apple Pods to help us find more Falcons fans just like you, to steal a line from one of our coworkers. And that's about it. So we'll see you Friday. Nick and I will be back Thursday morning. That's tomorrow morning on Mile High Huddle to talk Denver Broncos. Then we'll be back here on Friday to talk NFL. And, we'll hit on some of your favorite teams because we follow the chat along. That's why we do these live. It's because we want to be here for you. On that note, stay safe, stay dry, everybody. We'll see y'all next time.
Peace.